Hi, Crystal. It's me, Alyssa. This is my final video to you, and I just want to talk to you a little bit about your lesson plan that I saw through the video, and just some things that I thought were really proficient. There's just one thing I think I saw that maybe you could have done, but other than that, so for your lesson, you had kindergartners and you taught living and non-living to your kindergartners. And one thing I really liked about your lesson is that your objective and your goals for the lesson were aligned to state standards, which is something that's very important. Another thing that I liked at the very beginning of the video, the way you opened the lesson, was that you communicated the objective and you also had a visual of the objective for the students to turn back to. And it was a very simple, straight to the point objective that kindergartners especially could understand. So that was super important. You connected to prior knowledge for the students. You asked a bunch of questions like, what do we know about living and non-living things? What are some characteristics about living things? Some characteristics about non-living things. You had full student interaction, which is something that is super important, especially for kindergartners. It's hard to keep them still for a long time, and something that I think you did that was super unique is that you had them thumbs up or thumbs down if something was living or if something was non-living, and your expectations were very clear and to the point. The students knew what was expected, which was amazing. You had lots of visuals, and this especially is a great accommodation for ELLs, to see visuals. You had it projected on the smart boards. You had a good use of technology there. And then after they would decide with thumbs up, thumbs down, if it was living or non-living, you also had an anchor chart as a visual with the vocabulary terms living and non-living. And then you had pictures and you put them into each column on the little T-chart based on what the students had thought, which I thought that was super amazing. I love how you included the vocabulary on there too and you wrote it down. I guess the only thing that I guess like you could critique is that you could have maybe incorporated like the origin of the words living and non-living, especially for those ELL learners. That probably would have helped them a little more within the vocabulary aspect of it, but the visual aspect of it was amazing. You had full student interaction. One thing I loved is that you had them work in partners, which is another accommodation for ELLs especially. You had the students work in partners and they got to walk around the room, which again, especially for kindergartners, it's super hard to keep them just sitting still for a long time. So the fact that you were able to incorporate that in your lesson just brought another element to it, which is something that I really appreciated, and that I'm sure your kindergartners really appreciated. So I loved how they got to do that. I loved how while they were observing and walking around the room during that period of time, you were making sure to ask them questions like, how do we know this is living? How do we know that's non-living? What characteristics does that have? You were really like focusing on that. You were monitoring students. You weren't just letting them go walk around and waste time. You were making sure that the objectives and the goals that were stated in the beginning were followed throughout the whole lesson, which is something that I really liked. What else? You had them work in pairs. For your checking for understanding, you had the students create their own pictures of something living or non-living, and then you had them present it, which I felt was an amazing way to check for mastery of the objective and the goals for the day, especially because your objective and your goals was for them to distinguish whether it was living or non-living, and then to also explain how that is living and non-living and what those things need in order for it to be living and non-living. And you having them make a visual is really good for ELL learners, especially if they can't write it down. So you had them make a visual, then you had them orally explain and present why that was living or non-living. Overall, I truly loved your lesson. I thought it was a really good lesson, very interactive. It looked like your kindergartners enjoyed it, which at the end of the day is all that matters. It looked like mastery of the concept for your kindergartners was there. And just overall, I feel that it was a solid lesson and you were very proficient in the planning of the lesson and also the delivery of the lesson. So, yep, that's all. Good job.